there's never been a better time in the history of the industry to start a games company.
Be bold, have a big vision, and have a lot of heart.
हेलो दोस्तों, चैनल में आपका फिर से स्वागत है। इस वीडियो के अंदर एक इंटरव्यू ले रहे हैं लुमिकाई फंड के साथ। लुमिकाई फंड जो है एक वेंचर कैपिटल फंड है दैट इज़ फोकस्ड ऑन गेमिंग सेक्टर स्पेसिफिकली इन इंडिया। इसे लीड कर रहे हैं जस्टिन कीलिंग और सलोनी सेगल। तो इनके साथ एक इंटरेक्शन हुआ है इस वीडियो के अंदर एंड आपको ये वीडियो से बहुत सारी चीज़ें सीखने मिलेगी। वीडियो थोड़ा लंबा है, काफ़ी सारी चीज़ें कवर की हैं हम लोग ने। राइट फ्रॉम फंडिंग कैसे रेज़ करते हैं, प्रोसेस क्या होता है, कितने पैसे आप रेज़ कर सकते हो, कैसे टाइप की टीम बनानी पड़ती है या फिर टीम नहीं हो तो फिर कैसे फंडिंग रेज़ करे। तो ये सारी चीज़ें आपको इस वीडियो के अंदर देखने मिलेगी। तो वीडियो को स्टार्ट टू एंड तक देख लीजिए ताकि आपसे कोई इन्फॉर्मेशन मिस आउट ना हो पाए। एंड आई होप यू हैव अ वंडरफुल टाइम वॉचिंग दिस वीडियो। Hello everyone. So I have with me today Justin Sriram Kelling and Saloni Segal. These guys are from Lumikai Fund. So over to you guys, Justin and Saloni. Thanks a lot for taking out time and doing this interview. So what is Lumikai?
What is Lumikai? Okay, so maybe I'll explain the name first. So Lumikai is a portmanteau of two words. Lumi is the Latin root word for light. And Kai is, I guess, the Japanese and the Asian root word for tribe or group of people. And so Lumikai essentially means a group or a tribe or a community of forward-looking folks who are looking essentially to what the business is going to evolve into next. The slightly more prosaic answer to that is that we had the lumikai.com domain already registered, and so it was simpler for us to choose that name, but we've stuck with it and we like it.
Awesome. And can we have like a small introduction about you, Justin and Saloni, individually? Like, what is your background before Lumikai and stuff?
Sure, I can start. So yeah, and just to share a little bit about Lumikai first as well, Nikhil. We're actually India's first dedicated in gaming and interactive media VC. So which is great because we believe that gaming and interactive is on the cusp of this massive transformation, particularly in India, and there hasn't been a dedicated source of capital for it. So this is essentially the thesis of why we set up Lumikai as well. I come from the gaming and interactive media space, and so does Justin. Our backgrounds are a little bit different in the sense that I have seen the industry from all sides of the table. I've been an investor, I've been an entrepreneur, and I've been an M&A banker. So prior to this, I was with a fund called London Venture Partners, which is one of Europe's leading gaming VC. It was a fund which actually pioneered investing in gaming and interactive. And before that, I was the CEO and co-founder of a company called Truly Social, which was a venture-backed gaming studio building immersive social worlds, but for female audiences. And then I spent the first 6-7 years of my career in investment banking and private equity. I was with Morgan Stanley, with Barclays, did over $10 billion in M&A deals. And circle back to, I guess, 2019 is when I had the thought of setting up a sector-focused fund for India, and that's when I met Justin, and there was a complete meeting of minds, and we launched Lumikai in 2020.
Awesome. And about you, Justin?
Yeah, so my background is a little bit different to Saloni's, as she mentioned. I grew up in Delhi, was very much the nerd in my family. I've been a gamer since I was a kid. My grandfather used to travel globally for business, and one day he bought back a Nintendo. This is aging me a bit, but I became obsessed with it. I used to break these games down and kind of draw level maps and designs for like Mario and Zelda. So that set me off a very different course in my career and got me obsessed with gaming. And then fast forward a few years, I graduated and I've spent the last 18 years mainly as a builder and an operator in the global gaming market and the India gaming market. So the first half of that was kind of on the front lines of the industry in the US, in London and in Tokyo. I then came back to India about 9 years ago. I founded 2 gaming companies. And around that time started interacting with a lot of other gaming founders in India, as well as, I guess, the broader venture and funding community. And around that time, what really struck me was, I think one, the aspiration and just the quality of founders that we were starting to see come into the Indian market. combined with, as Salone mentioned, this kind of massive white space and opportunity to build gaming products, both for the local market, but also for the world. But at the same time, I think the venture community back then, they didn't really understand the gaming market. They weren't that focused on gaming. We've obviously seen a shift of that in the last year or so, which has been great for everyone. But I think the disconnect was there between the founders who were looking for folks who had kind of been through that painful journey of building gaming companies themselves. And so there was this kind of mismatch between, I think, the opportunity and also the potential of the market. So, around that time, I've been working with some of the big global game companies worldwide, and they had also become interested in India since, Geo had launched and all the various inflection points they're familiar with. Some of these guys had also missed out on kind of the early first wave of China, were very interested in investing in India, not just for financial gain, but also to really understand the market and to kind of tap into its future potential. So Salone and I joined forces. This was about a year and a half ago. And over the course of last summer, brought a lot of these global gaming companies together and launched the fund in August last year.
So guys, thank you for the introduction. And I know that you guys are also working on an initiative for, early stage startups and all. I think it's called Lumikai Spark. So could you guys also give a small introduction about that?
Sure. So look, I mean, if you have a great business idea, a great game idea, one of the things we like to emphasize is that it's never too early to talk with us. So, in the spirit of that, we've launched a new game program called Lumikai Spark. This is essentially a game jam session where you can bring your ideas, your business to us, even if you're at a very, very early stage. If you just want to get feedback, you want to validate what you're building, we track the market very closely, both domestically and also worldwide. And we get a lot of inputs from our base of global investors as well. So if you want to essentially validate what you're building and you want to do it without, I guess, the kind of exam pressure of a traditional VC pitch, this is the format for that. And you can get in touch with us on our website. Just go to lumkai.com. We're friendly. We love to jam. We love games. So hope to hear from you soon.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we've got slots open. We're running this program for this entire month. You can sign up and you can look up on our website. The initiative is called Lumikai Spark. You can look up at our LinkedIn. There's a registration form. You can sign up for it, and we'll get back to you with slots depending on how we select the studios. But essentially, this is a great way to come on our mentorship track, and the registrations are open till the 30th of June.
So guys, utilize this opportunity and get in touch with these guys. And with this, we began our interview. I think what you guys are doing over here is great. And, ever since I announced that we would be having this interview on my YouTube channel and on LinkedIn, and we shared this across a lot of communities. So, I have compiled a list of 11 questions. So I think that would serve to answer most of the questions that people have regarding this industry. So can we get started with those 11 questions right away?
Sounds good. That's good.
Awesome. So the very first question is that how can one qualify for funding, and also on which stage the person or the startup can get funded, in the starting stage, or is it in the mid stage of the startup?
We're an early stage seed fund, and we've spoken about this in some of our Medium blogs and whatnot, but I think we can't emphasize this enough. It's never too early to come and speak with us, to come and jam with us. We have our thesis on the market. We have a bunch of white spaces which we feel have no incumbents at the moment and can potentially house future unicorns or successful businesses. But that process for us begins really at the kind of 0 to 1 journey. So we actually recently completed an investment that's not announced yet, but that was just 2 founders and a prototype, and they're building in a space which is somewhat new for India, but we feel has a lot of upside and is super exciting. And we've been working with them on team building, on strategy and product feedback, and really the whole process. So we're very happy to jam. And I think, broadly, the feedback I would give to anyone thinking of starting a business is that, if you have conviction, you've thought about the space, you're willing to commit to it long term, we're very happy to hear from you right from the start.
And personally, I have one question. Why gaming, right? I mean, we look at most of the VC funds, they are diversified into multiple sectors. So why gaming specifically for Lumikai?
There are two answers to that. The first is where the market is at in India. And the second is what is the ability for this industry to be able to take VC capital, right? Now, the first answer to that is, if you look at now India is still a very young VC market, right? We've just seen about one venture cycle. Early early VC investment started maybe about 10, 15 years back. The earliest VC fund was maybe a fund that launched 15 years back. So we are still in that very early stage of venture capital. And now we are starting to see companies get listed. We're starting to see companies getting acquired, and VC funds who had previously invested and been in the market for that long are now starting to see return and starting to see payback. And this is a market which is just starting to mature. Now, when markets mature, you start to see that there is enough depth in the market, and which allows for sector focused strategy. Because earlier, maybe 5-10 years back, it doesn't make sense to have sector focused strategies, because even the obvious winners of, let's say, e-commerce, fintech, etc., had barely been established, right? And you needed agnostic funds which were investing across sectors to back those founders.
Yeah.
Now that's changed. Now there's enough depth and there's enough breadth in the market to say, well, now a sector focused strategy makes sense, and hence you can have these verticals within venture capital. And that's obviously, one is timing of where the market is. Yeah. The second is, I think, why gaming, more importantly, is I track the market, and when I was building Truly Social, at that point of time, I had an India SKU and did a lot of work with Indian game publishers, including Nazara and a bunch of other ecosystem players. But the gaming environment of, let's say, 2013 is very different from the gaming environment of 2021. Right? 5 years back, there were 25 game development studios. Now there are more than 600. Yeah. We've had Geo launch, which has obviously made data dirt cheap. And now you've got a industry where you've got a lot of founders entering the space. You've got a lot of capital coming in to the market. Yeah. And you're seeing the Indian consumer starting to play games, right? Like last year, Indians consumed 7 billion gaming apps. Like, they contributed 17% of the mobile gaming installs in the world. They're the largest, fastest growing market of mobile gaming. So that's why gaming has become so important now. And the third, I think, aspect of this is it requires a sector focused strategy. You see, gaming and building games is very complex. It's an art as well as it's a science, and you'll know that, right? Like, you're in the business of building games, you know how difficult it is. It's not like consumer internet. It's not like you build a platform and users will come. Yeah. You require creative talent, you require technical talent, you require data science, you require analytics, you require user acquisition. So it requires specialist capital, and it requires people with experience and expertise to understand how to build in the sector, and that's why we set up a gaming focus fund.
Yeah, and plus I think your gaming background also does help in kind of understanding the ground realities, and I'm sure Lumikai has been connected with all the global powerhouses around, right? So I think that makes perfect sense. So then we also have a second question, is that this is more technical and dives into the nitty-gritties, is that do first-time developers need to create a demo and get market feedback before approaching an investor? And is this a shared sentiment? Should we lean into this as a benefit when seeking investment? So that's the question.
Yeah, look, the standard typical answer to this is that most investors will want to see some kind of product, some kind of market traction, and some kind of metrics before engaging in a funding discussion. I think that's not just for VCs, that's for publishers as well.
Correct.
As I said earlier, we operate a little bit differently. We're very happy to jam with founders earlier on product market fit, the competitive landscape, team building, and even just frankly to validate what they're building. You and I have had some interesting conversations about what you guys are building. And that's something which we enjoy doing. We're all gamers. We enjoy getting stuck into the process. We built gaming companies. So I think, to answer that question from a broader lens, I think, yes, the majority of VCs and certainly publishers will want to see some kind of, at least a demo that they can get their hands on, or at least a vertical slice, which is indicative of, what the game looks like. And, you guys put together a fantastic kind of, proof of concept visual, which really caught our attention. And I know it's caught the attention of a lot of publishers worldwide as well. Yeah. But I would say that, again, if you're a founder that especially if you're a founder that has specific sector or format expertise in a particular area, and you identified a white space, you've done your research in an area that you believe has a lot of upside and scale potential in India or even globally, we're very happy to talk to you early before there's even a demo.
And just to vouch for that, guys, I just want to tell you guys that, these are the people who we were actively engaging in conversations with regards to Mumbai Gullies. And I have to thank these people publicly for connecting me to the developers of Bioshock Infinite and Final Fantasy. So we've had an amazing time. And I also, I would urge you guys to take a look at the description. I've put out their contact links. I've put out their emails. So do get in touch with these people. They are like super friendly, and they would actually handhold you and take in that kind of effort which is required for your game to become successful. So that's just a personal testimonial from my side, which now brings me to the next question: is that how does a VC fund operate, and after how much time we should, or do we even have to pay back to the investor? So what is this process exactly?
Yeah, so well, you definitely have to pay back the investor. That would be good.
Yeah.
So look, a VC fund, I totally understand that question. VC in itself is a very opaque, very non-transparent industry. And especially if you're in the creative business or in the technical business, it's a pain to have to think of that. But, typically VC funds are funds which collect money from global, whether it's in global investors, domestic investors, it could be some individuals, it could be strategics, financial institutions, and we're as a VC, we're custodians of that capital, and then we make the decisions to deploy that capital into opportunities that we feel are going to be profitable for our investors. So hence we are also on the hook to provide returns to our investors, and hence the way we pick investments is with that lens as to which one of these investments is going to be able to yield a return. Now, typically VCs have 7 to 10 year life cycles. So that's essentially the time period a company has to generate a profit and return that capital back to the investor. Some VC funds have a shorter life cycle, some have a longer life cycle. So it's always good to have that conversation with the investor as to say, what is the life cycle? What is the exit period that you would like on the business? And if you're in gaming, typically if your game does well and it's extraordinarily successful, you can see exits in 3 years, in 5 years. In my experience, we've seen shorter exit cycles. If you're building a platform, sometimes those take a much longer time cycle to yield an exit. So it really does depend on what you're building.
Yeah.
But it's also important to understand how VC work, especially early stage capital. There's a concept called power law in VC. So, and because it is extremely risky, we're investing often at companies which are pre-revenue, sometimes they even pre-product. It's sometimes just the founders that we're backing. So these are really, really risky bets because there's so much that can go wrong in that 5-10 year journey. The common rule of thumb is that 20% of your investments will make about 80 to 90% of the return. So it's like this steep power law, which is like, instead of like being a normal curve, it's like a steep power law like that.
Yeah. And
so that's why when VCs analyze your business and they ask you these tough questions around, okay, what's the market like? Or how many people are going to play your game? Or, how many units are you going to sell of this game and what are you going to price it at? It's because they're doing the math in their head to see, okay, is this going to be $1 billion business? Am I going to have enough equity in this business to then return capital to my investors, which then justifies the fact that those investors have put money into me, and then hence we have deployed it into.
And when it comes to funding, there are multiple rounds that we keep on hearing, right? I mean, there's the seed round, Series A, Series B. So what are these funding rounds exactly that we keep hearing about?
So with seed round. So typically the way I guess it's the trajectory of a business and how it develops. So the way sometimes companies do rounds is you start off and you raise some money from, let's say, family and friends, or there are some investors who are angel investors. They're literally angels, right? They're helping you incubate your businesses, or there are funds like us who invest at the very, very early stage. So that becomes your seed or pre-seed round, where you have an idea, You probably have some kind of a prototype, an MVP, and you have this very big, ambitious vision of what you want to do. And depending on founder background, about whether you have experience, you have expertise in this business, you're literally raising money on your own self. So that's essentially the seed round, right? You've got no traction, no metrics.
Yep.
The next round is what they call a Series A round. This is now when metrics start to matter. So if you're a game, this will be metrics like, okay, how's the retention of your game? Like, how many users are playing that game? What is the engagement? What's the session length? Or if you've built a prototype and you've managed to sell some units, or you've got in-app purchases, this is the time when you want to see early signs of monetization and some kind of traction. So that's Series A. Series B is when you are growth stage, where essentially you've achieved product market fit. You've proved that your game works. There are people who love it. There are people who are playing it. And now you need capital to scale. Now, in a case, if you're a mobile gaming company, it could be, I need capital to do user acquisition. Like now my retention works, my monetization works, my game mechanics work, people love it. But now I need to get my game to millions of users out there, and I need Series B funding, right?
Yeah.
Or it could be, for example, we've sold these many units. This was our first game. We sold these many units. It was a clear success. We've learned a lot from this. Now we want to make something bigger and better. And that's, I'm going to raise Series B money.
Yeah.
And then so on and so forth. At each point of time, your valuation increases, and you're able to, as long as you're able to show great upward traction in a market which is very big, you should be able to do these funding rounds. Yeah. Supercell, for example, Supercell did a first round with Tekis, which was a Finnish, they were Finland government grant, and there was London Venture Partners and a few other angels who gave them money. The next round was a $3 million. I think the next round was a $12 million round with Axel, and after that they were profitable. Like if you hear them talk, they'll say there was money coming out of the windows. Like it was so much money. So then they started reinvesting back in growth. And then they finally did a massive round with SoftBank, and then after that they sold to Tencent, etc. That's an incredible trajectory. But if you do it right as a gaming company, you also have the ability to become profitable very fast and reinvest that capital into growth. And then the money that you raise can largely be just giving your employees liquidity, giving yourself as a founder liquidity, giving your early investors capital back.
Yeah. The other question that I had was, let's say, for example, if someone is raising capital, right? Let's say like today, an X company wants to raise $1 million, and then there's this question that, okay, these guys are giving me the money, but what do I have to give them in return? Is it like is it an amount that is scheduled to be paid back? Or is it something external that we'll have to give? We keep on hearing these terms about equity dilution. So could you also touch upon that what exactly is equity dilution? And then how does, once we have an influx of funds, then what does the valuation of a company mean, and how is that derived and all?
So there's different kinds of financing, right? If you're looking at traditional VC financing, we would typically evaluate a business. And then if we believe that there's long-term potential and scale in the team, we would be long-term partners on that business with you. So what that means is that we wouldn't be investing in a game necessarily or a project. It would be an investment into the company itself, which is equity financing, equity dilution, essentially. So we would be investing, let's say, $1 million for, let's say, 20% of the company. And that is really a reflection of the fact that it's not so much of a transactional investment. It's really, it's an investment into the long-term success of your business. Yep. So when it comes to some of the exit options that Salone talked about, then, if you then sell that company for $1 billion, then whatever portion of the equity in the company that we hold, we would then get a return on our investment on. So that's typically how equity dilution works. But there are other models as well. Of course, there's project financing. If you want to, in fact, there's a bunch of project financing funds out there, especially in gaming at the moment, that if you don't want to dilute for your company specifically and you just want to raise around one particular game, you can do a deal which is somewhat in between what a traditional venture capital fund does and, let's say, what a publisher does. And the publishing model is more about getting an upfront for some of your development costs, some of your marketing costs, or maybe in fact all of those costs. And then, after you release the game, the publisher would recoup those costs. And there would be no equity, but of course you would not be earning any money until that game turned some kind of profit. And then the profit is usually split with the developer depending on the deal between 30, 40 to 70%.
With regards to Lumikai now, do you guys fund startups with single entrepreneurs, or is there like a prerequisite for you to have a team? And if so, then what should be the background of these people?
There are two ways of looking at it. One is I'm building a company and I feel very passionately about it, and I want this company to just sustain my lifestyle and probably do well, and that's a perfectly great choice, and that's perfectly okay. And in that framework, you can be a solo founder, but the chances of raising venture capital for that are very low to slim, I would say. The next model is, I have this great vision and I want to take something to the world and I want to build a company. And in that case, we really encourage people to have a co-founder or at least have a team around them, because no great company is built alone. You need somebody, and as a founder, you will notice, both of us have been founders. You need somebody to complement you. You need somebody to make up for your own blind spots, because running a business is probably the hardest thing that I've ever had to do as an individual. And it's always good to have co-founders who understand they're running at the same pace as you, who have the same vision as you, but also bring different skill sets to the team. Like, for example, if you're very strong in technical and you're very, very strong technically, you need somebody with a strong creative bent of mind. You also need somebody with a business bent of mind. So it's always great to build that team before you start thinking about venture capital, because just the chances of your success are that much higher if you do that.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it's particularly important if you're setting up a gaming studio, and gaming is kind of unique, right? Because it's this intersection of technology, art, culture, and then kind of all your metrics and design. So you really need someone who's going to be a leader and someone to just bounce ideas off and take ownership of both the technical side of it, product side of it, design, and then distribution and the rest of the various functions.
Awesome.
It doesn't mean you can't start as a solo founder. And of course, we have spoken to solo founders who have a great vision, they've got great experience, and then we help connect them to, a good CTO in that space. But ideally, if you want your company to really scale and you want to retain perspective and vision, it's better to have a team.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because at the end of the day, a company is defined as a group of people coming together to run a business. So yeah, I do agree with you on that. The next question is, how do I convince someone to fund my game? Or does a good game get funds automatically? Or does like a good game is more likely to get funded?
Well, a good game certainly helps. But of course, in the early stages, it's hard to tell if it's a good game or not. So I think more than that, you need to, as a founder, you need to do your research and you need to pick your market carefully. If you're going after the global market, look, the global market is very well capitalized, very competitive in gaming. So you need to think about your target market really carefully. How can you carve out a niche, or how can you revitalize, let's say, an existing one with fresh mechanics or some kind of new spin? And then I think for the domestic, if you focus more on the domestic market, look, I mean, there's a lot of white spaces in the Indian market. We fundamentally believe as a fund that the Indian gamer is more sophisticated than the market currently assumes. That we've seen again and again with PUBG and mid-core games that they're hungry for deeper and more sophisticated games. So I think, for example, one way to look at it is, it's not so much about whether my game is good or not, but are there games, let's say, that are already popular in India, and how can I create something that's innovative or deeper around those proven categories? I think having that vision and thinking about where those white spaces are is super important. Another way to think about it is potentially, you look at game genres that are already popular. We do this a lot internally as a fund, but these genres haven't become popularized yet in the domestic market. So I think it's really about picking your audience, doing your research, and then thinking carefully about the space that you're going to be operating in before you build. And then obviously the rest is around execution.
Personally, as Lumikai, or just as your personal preferences, what would be some of the games that have come out of India that have been like your personal favorites?
I'm a big fan. So it's you're putting me on the spot here, because we're friends with a lot of these studios. Look, I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff happening in the indie scene. I really like what Born Monkey's been doing. I like what Zigma Games have been doing. I think, on the mobile side of it, I'm a big fan of, Play Simple have really nailed the core mechanics around word games. they're offline. You can play them on the plane. They're super fun, very zen. I think Nukebox has done a terrific job with their games as well. They're global standard games. I would be remiss if I didn't include some of our portfolio companies' games like Bombay Play. They're building social games, which are a lot of fun. And All-Star Games are building awesome cricket games, still at the early stage, but some of their earlier titles I've been pretty addicted to.
That also brings you to my next question, is that you mentioned that you invested already in these two companies, right? So what was the factors that drew towards the decision of investing in these two companies?
Yeah. So I think, we look at founders through like a few lenses when we're looking, and especially at the early stage, right? Because you have such little information to back companies. So I think we kind of have a 3-4 level of framework when we look at companies. The first is the founders. Are the founders uniquely positioned to build this company? Do they have a certain way of thinking, or do they have a certain skill set or a certain experience that will really, really set them up for success? And I think that's very critical to us. The second, I think the way we look at is, how well researched are they about what they want to build? Do they understand the competitive landscape? Do they understand what it will take for them to get from 0 to, let's forget 100? What will it take to get from 0 to 10? How well equipped are they? And do they know what they know? And do they know what they don't know? I think that's also very, very important for founders. Yeah. Another way we look at it is, the ability to just tell a story and inspire people, right? Because this is going to be super essential for company building. You're going to, and as a founder, you'll realize this, you need to be a salesperson, you need to be a strategist, you need to be a technically strong person, you need to be everything, right? But you need to, most importantly, need to be able to sell yourself and your story and inspire others to join you in that journey, whether it's your talent, whether it's your stakeholders, whether it's investors, whether it's publishers. You need to take people on that journey with you. And I think that's an important lens for us as well. Another lens is to say, how passionate are you? Are you going to be committed to this? Because, every overnight success took about 10 years to make, right? You're going to be doing this for the next 10 years of our life. We're giving you money and going to be supporting you for the next 5-10 years. Are you going to stay? And are you really going to make it work and, be committed to that project? I think that's super critical for us. And I think lastly is just general level of curiosity and being adaptable. I call it being firmly pliable, where you have strong conviction, but you also take feedback, right? And you're able to then course correct accordingly, and you can change your mind as you discover, especially in gaming, right? You will try, you will fail, you will iterate, you will build again, and that's only possible if you have the ability to take on feedback.
And with regards to the legal aspects now, how to plan fundraising and what are the important measures that a founder should typically keep in mind while going through the process?
Yeah, so look, I mean, if you're planning to fundraise with venture capital in mind, there is a higher bar. So you need to be thinking about your company formation. Where do you set up your company? You may want to take some advice from some kind of tax expert, some legal expert on whether you want to set up in India or globally. We typically fund companies that are set up in India. You should also be thinking about keeping a record of all of your financial statements, your cash flow, your projections. Now, of course, a lot of this in the early stage is going to be theoretical, but I think budgeting for your project financing, your costs of development, your key talent, and part of key talent is also what we call your ESOPs, which is kind of, I guess, the pool of your company where you can use to attract key hires. And you may not be able to afford a lot of very high-profile talent at the beginning, but you can offset that by giving them some small percentage in the company. So I think from a venture perspective, you need to make sure that you have, and you're not going to have all of this in-house to start, right? You want to make sure that you're connected to the right CA, the right financial planners, and the right, I guess, tax management. A lot of studios that we talk to don't think about this until a little bit later, and that's fine. But I think for a venture scale company, it's something you want to be thinking about right from the start. And this is one of the services that we provide. We work with, some of the best best-in-class game-specific lawyers, fund accountants, etc. That often we have to introduce and have them kind of onboarded and educated a little bit about that process from the start.
So just a reminder, guys, I've mentioned all their contact details in the description. Please go ahead and visit their website. Go ahead, check out, drop them a mail. Maybe if you have a company that you are looking to raise capital, these guys are the best people to get in touch with. Or maybe if you just want to present a game demo that you've built and nobody's really listening to you, so these guys will definitely take out some time from their schedule, and they will kind of give you a feedback that will help you improve your game.
And just to add to that, Nikhil, we've launched a special initiative to do exactly that. It's called Lumikai Spark.
Yeah.
It's an initiative where it's registrations are open right now. You can come and sign up for a 15-minute one-on-one jam session with me and Justin. We've got slots open, and we're going to be closing registration on the 30th of June. So if you're a founder, you're building in this space, come and talk to us.
Awesome. So guys, that's a reminder for Lumikai Spark. The next question is, how does a fundraising for a game operate differently from that of a fundraising for a typical startup? And what could be like the common challenges, and how could you overcome them while presenting your proposal for fundraising for the said game project?
I think I can give my perspective. I think the first step that you should do as if you're building a game company is first determine, do you want to be a venture scale business? And we've at Lumikai, we're going to be releasing a blog post about exactly that are you building a venture ready business, or are you not? But the first step would be to identify, are you building a venture ready business, or do you want to raise money for your game alone, which is more project finance, or do you want a strategic publisher to finance and publish your game? Because all three are slightly separate routes. They are not mutually exclusive, so you can do one or the other, but it often helps to have clarity because your approach for each is going to slightly differ. Now, if you are going down the venture capital route, then there are certain things that a venture capital would like to see, like, what is your experience? What is the team? And some of the other things that we've discussed. If you have a game idea, if you're a previously successful founder who's built a gaming company, obviously that conversation is a little bit easier. If you are new to gaming and you're approaching this industry with a new idea, then we like to see a few other things which we've talked about. So that's kind of on the venture capital side. If you're raising project finance, and then I think I don't want to speak too much about people who do project finance, but then having a prototype or having a game running and which is revenue generating becomes very important, because the project finance will be on that basis. And then if you're targeting a strategic publisher, that's a whole different ball game as well, because even they would like to see some kind of prototypes. The typical kind of challenges that we see for at least young game developers are that they aren't sure of the industry or the genre which they're building. They are not clear about their own skill sets and what they can build and what it will take for them to build that genre. Sometimes it's experience, right? If you as a game developer have been building match 3 games and then you're suddenly saying, I want to build a first person shooter, you haven't really understood that skill sets that you need are very different, right? So sometimes it's just not being self-aware of that and what you're good at and what your strengths are. I think these are largely sometimes it's just that you haven't researched the landscape enough. Like, I want to build hidden objects game, but I have no idea, what the entire world is building. Or I want to build, single player social games for, I don't know, a particular audience, but, this was something that Playfish did back in 2010 and, that bus sailed. So it's just basically being aware of what's going to trend and what's going to work.
Awesome.
And also, I would just add one thing to that. You've covered it partly, Salone, but I think focus is really, really important. Because especially if you're planning to build a venture scale company, it's not just about your first product might not be successful and your second product may not be. We've heard the stories of Supercell and Rovio and all of these companies that maybe it was their third or fourth or even 30th title that was successful, but they iterated quickly, they failed quickly, they moved on, they learned from their mistakes. And what they ended up doing is building a culture of innovation and speciality around a particular area that they had focus on they had a thesis on. So I think one of the things that we really look for is, look, there's a lot of opportunities in the Indian gaming market and globally, but there's also pockets within that that can sustain very, very large businesses. So I think focus, and that partly feeds into what we were saying earlier about doing your research on where you're going to be building your team and your competence and your skill set around is super important.
Yeah, and just to also add up to your question, a lot of people have this kind of misunderstanding that their very first game is going to fetch them $1 million. So how true is that, and how, what is, could you just demystify this part for most of the people that, are potentially looking forward to get into the industry and want to make $1 million? I mean, there's nothing wrong in wanting to make $1 million, right? But I think you also need to understand how this industry works. So any thoughts on that front?
Yeah. It's incredibly rare. I mean, even the guys at Supercell were incredibly successful. Their first game, Gunshine, was not a success. It wasn't this resounding success. I mean, it's incredibly difficult to get that milestone. We know, especially if you're building like games, you need at least 3 shots at goal to get it right, because it just takes that much time to iterate. Sometimes it's much more if you're building more complex projects. Your first game should be just about you understanding the process of what it's like to build, let alone the fact that you think you're going to make it successful. It's just about going through that process, learning. Game development is an incredibly brutal process, and the chances of success in the first shot are just incredibly rare.
Yeah. And also, a lot of people now, if you go ahead on Google and search for Minecraft development time, it just says over the 6 days. So again, this is also like a myth, right? So Justin, maybe you could highlight a bit on this part as well. Like, what is this story behind Minecraft, and why can't I make a game in 6 days and become a billionaire?
Well, I mean, it's Minecraft is an outlier. I mean, Mohang put that together, and he had help from the community. And sometimes this happens, right? Like unicorns exist, and they come out of the blue, but they're unicorns. Now, if you want to chase unicorns, you're welcome to do it. But the reality is, if you look at 99% of successful game companies worldwide, they didn't follow this process. I wish it was the case. I've been building games my entire life. But unfortunately, it does require focus, deep thinking around what that focus is going to be, then building your team and competence around that, and then trying and failing, learning quickly and moving forward. So, I mean, there are some examples of this. We've seen it in hyper casual. We've seen it sometimes in mobile. Even things like Flappy Bird kind of came out of nowhere and became very successful and then disappeared. But you shouldn't be making your assumptions around building a game or a sustainable business from those outlier examples, unfortunately. Now, the good news is that it's very easy today to prototype. 10, 15 years ago, even 5 years ago, you had to really grapple with a lot of technical understanding to build an engine, even build your own engine. There's a lot of democratized creative tools now. Everything is pretty much plug and play. You can teach yourself, and you can prototype and find the fun very, very quickly. And that's something you can do with a very small team. There's great communities out there, both in India and worldwide. You can just search for them on Google. You'll find a lot of collaborators, and you'll likely find team members very quickly. So I would not be in any rush to try and, this is not a get rich quick business, unfortunately, but it is one of the most exciting businesses with the biggest upside over the next 10 years. So if you're serious about it, build your team, do your research, be prepared to fail a couple of times and learn from those mistakes.
Yeah, and just to add to that, even Minecraft, right? There were several early private testing versions, several betas that were made. It was made public first, I think, in 2009 or so, before it finally released in 2011. So there was just even that, which looked like it just took 6 days to build it. Yeah, but it took several years for it to become the success that it did, and it's a constant iteration of it, right? So
yeah, and all companies do this, right? I mean, we see what Fortnite is today, but Fortnite, when it was originally designed, was a very different kind of game. It had none of the features that you see in it at the moment. I was actually out with the Fortnite folks the night they were going to push the button and launch that game, and they had no idea where that game was going to go. It was basically an experiment. Then they iterated over the course of weeks and months, and that was just the process. I mean, that's a company like Epic Games that has a track record of building some of the biggest IP in the world. So, I mean, I think this is you can of course hit it out the park on your first game, but in our experience, having played and worked on games for the last 20 years, it's very much the exception, not the rule.
Yeah, and even Epic Games, right? That's a great example. Epic Games was set up by Tim Sweeney in 1991.
Yeah.
Who knew that it would be what it is in 2021? It's taken them so long. I mean, Tim Sweeney was tinkering with Unreal before Unreal even became a thing, right? Like there is so to anybody who is reaching out to you and saying, I'm going to build a game and I'm going to kill it the next day, tell him to do some research.
Yeah, I think that was some wonderful advice from you guys. And guys, just a reminder once again, all the links are in the description. Get in touch with these guys, join the Lumikai Spark program. And thanks a lot, Justin and Salone. Any parting thoughts that you want to give to the audience?
I think we've covered a lot of it, but I would just leave you guys with the thought that there's never been a better time in the history of the industry to start a games company or to build a game. The tools are out there, the communities are out there, this process is democratized. There's a lot of capital chasing founders. This is a creator's market. You guys have all the power. If you have a dream, you want to build something, you can go and build it. There's nothing stopping you. We hope to be adding value. We're in this for the long term. We just launched our fund 7-8 months ago, but we are in this for the next 20 years. So very happy to speak with you. Very happy to help. Maybe we fund you, maybe we don't. But even if we don't, we'll do everything we can to make you a success.
Yeah, I think my thoughts are, look, be bold, have a big vision, and have a lot of heart. This is a creative business. It's also a science, but this is largely a creative business. And just be original and be yourselves while you're building this game, and have that transmuted through the way you talk, the way you bring people together, the way you talk to your investors, and that's incredibly important.
Yeah. Awesome, guys. And just to part, with my own thoughts is that just be transparent with the investors. Investors are not going to eat you out. If you are more transparent with them, chances are that you will get funded more likely rather than, keeping some secrets within. So that's about it, guys. I hope you guys had a wonderful time watching this video, and I hope you guys learned a lot. I wish you guys all the best. Please do get in touch with these guys, and I hope your gaming startup gets funded. Thank you, Justin and Salone, for taking our time to do this interview, and we hope to stay in touch. So that's it, दोस्तों. I hope आपको ये जो वीडियो था, ये इंटरव्यू था जस्टिन एंड सलोनी के साथ, ये पसंद आया होगा. कमेंट सेक्शन में बता दीजिए आपके क्या ओपिनियंस थे इस इंटरव्यू के बारे में. और जाइए यार इनकी वेबसाइट के और अपने स्टार्टअप को रजिस्टर कीजिए, इनको मेल डालिए, और सारी चीज़ें आपको डिस्क्रिप्शन के अंदर मिल जाएगी. सो गेट इन टच विद देम, एंड आई होप योर गेमिंग स्टार्टअप गेट्स फंडेड. ऑल दी बेस्ट टू यू. और अगर आपको ये वीडियो पसंद आया तो एक लाइक बटन प्रेस कर दीजिए. मेरे चैनल को पहली बार ढूंढ रहे हो तो सब्सक्राइब कर दीजिए और वो बेल आइकन दबा दीजिए ताकि आप मेरे अगले वीडियोस को मिस नहीं कर पाओ. मैं गेम्स और गेम डेवलपमेंट रिलेटेड काफ़ी सारे वीडियोस बनाता हूँ. इस वीडियो के लिए इतना ही. मिलता हूँ मेरे अगले वीडियो में. तब तक के लिए अपना ख्याल रखना.